Terror on the steps of diplomacy: what the Washington, D.C. shooting reveals about rising antisemitism and global polarization. By Worldwire News Desk. The recent fatal shooting of 2 Israeli embassy staffers outside a Jewish museum in Washington, D.C., reveals more than a tragic act of violence. It exposes deep-rooted antisemitism and the urgent need for renewed global dialogue on hate, security, and empathy. On a quiet evening in Washington, D.C., the heartbeat of American diplomacy, a brutal and senseless act of violence shattered more than lives. It pierced the veil of civility we often take for granted in democratic societies. On May 21, 2025, 2 young Israeli embassy staffers were gunned down outside the Capitol Jewish Museum. The shooter, 30-year-old Elias Rodriguez, allegedly shouted "Free Palestine" during the attack, which authorities are investigating as an anti-Semitic act of terrorism. This incident is more than just another headline. It is a tragic reflection of a world grappling with deepening fault lines. It calls us to critically examine the intersection of politics, identity, and hate in an era where extremism travels faster than empathy. A chilling reminder of persistent hate. The victims, described as a young couple planning their future, represent more than statistics in a rising tide of global hate crimes. They were emissaries of peace, not soldiers in a war. Their deaths serve as a stark reminder that antisemitism is not a relic of the past. It thrives, even in societies that champion diversity and democracy. The rise in anti-Semitic violence in the West, including the United States, has seen a troubling resurgence. From attacks on synagogues to defacing of Jewish schools and now targeted shootings, the Jewish community is again forced to question its safety in spaces that should be sanctuaries. What makes this attack even more unnerving is the setting outside a Jewish museum, during a cultural and diplomatic event. The symbolism cannot be overlooked. It was not only an attack on individuals but a direct assault on history, identity, and diplomacy. Weaponizing ideology, a dangerous precedent. Rodriguez's alleged chant of "Free Palestine" reveals a deeply troubling phenomenon: the hijacking of legitimate political grievances to justify violence. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is complex, painful, and unresolved. But using that pain as a pretext for terror only deepens the divide and delegitimizes the struggle for justice on all sides. Activism loses its moral ground the moment it crosses into hatred. Movements that claim to stand for human rights must denounce such violence unequivocally. We must make a clear distinction between political advocacy and hate-fueled extremism. This incident underscores how unresolved global conflicts are increasingly finding their way into local, civilian spaces, with innocent lives caught in the crossfire. The failure of warning systems. What failed? How did a man with no publicly known history of extremist affiliations, acting alone, managed to carry out such a fatal attack in one of the most heavily surveilled cities in the world? The answer lies in the modern nature of radicalization. Today's extremists aren't always part of organized terror groups. Many are lone actors, radicalized online, inspired by echo chambers, conspiracy theories, and dehumanizing narratives. The lone wolf is no longer a fringe anomaly but an emerging pattern of domestic terrorism. Our current security frameworks must evolve to address this shift. Intelligence agencies, policymakers, and tech platforms must work together to detect early signals, especially on social media, where hate festers and grows unchecked. Empathy is a strategic imperative. Beyond law enforcement and counterterrorism, the greatest weapon against extremism is empathy. We live in a world where outrage is instant, but understanding is optional. Social media fuels division. Political rhetoric often inflames rather than heals. In such a climate, it becomes easy to forget the humanity of those we disagree with. We must teach and model empathy across schools, media, workplaces, and especially within governments. Political leaders should remember that words matter. Demonizing the other may win votes, but it costs lives. Diplomacy must be reimagined as not only a tool for statecraft but for societal healing. When embassies and cultural institutions are no longer safe, the very essence of diplomacy dialogue becomes endangered. Conclusion: can we mourn and mobilize? The loss of 2 innocent diplomats in Washington, D.C. is a tragedy that should shake us all. But if we stop at mourning, we fail them. Their deaths must become a turning point in how we confront hate, understand conflict, and protect the sanctity of civil life. Will we rise to the challenge of building societies where disagreement does not mean dehumanization, where pain is not weaponized, and where peace is not a naive ideal but a shared goal? The world stands at a crossroads. Will we choose empathy or escalation? The answer may well define the legacy we leave behind.